Hey guys, I'm going to take you through my warm-up. Let's go, meet you on the mat. So we're going to be starting with some neck circles, dropping our chin down to our chest, going from shoulder to shoulder. We'll go 8 times all together. Typically I only go forwards and not backwards because for me it doesn't feel comfortable on my vertebrae, but if it feels comfortable for you, you can totally go all the way around. Just make sure as you're going back that you're lifting and elongating through the neck and not just dumping backwards. Next, we're going to be taking it into our shoulder circles. 8 going backwards and 8 going forwards. As we're going through any range of motion exercise, we want to be moving through the largest range of motion that we can. That way we are building the strength within that range of motion, as well as little by little increasing that range of motion. Next, we're going to come into our shoulder rotation. So we're going to be rolling the shoulders open, going back, and then rolling them in, coming down. Again, trying to get the largest rotation that we can, keeping the arms elevated out to the side. We're going to go 8 to 10 of these, and then bending the elbows, we're going to continue this rotation for another 8 to 10. So really think of going as far back in both directions, as I'm emphasizing here with that double tap. You're welcome to do that, but that was mainly just for emphasis. Next, we're going to come into our circles. So keeping the elbows lifted, really just firing up all the rotators in the shoulders. We're going to go 10 going each direction, and if doing the circles in different directions at different timings is a little confusing, you're more than welcome to do them all in the same direction at the same time and shake it out afterwards. Moving down to the torso now. We're going to stretch over to this side. So this is going to come all the way up the side of the torso. We're going to anchor that outside hip down and think of stretching all the way through the rib cage, trying to separate as we go. And then we're going to square the hips and chest down towards the floor, making sure that front leg is nice and straight and the back is flat. If you need to raise up a little bit higher so that it's comfortable, be sure to do that. And then we're switching hands, arching the chest back, and now stretching the opposite side of the torso, but this time a little bit more towards the front, still anchoring down at the hip. Now we're going to bring both hands all the way down to the floor, trying to get the hands flat, and if you can reach past the foot, it'll increase the stretch through the leg and through the low back and the hips. After we go through this, we're going to swing over to the other foot and take it all the way up to standing. Each of these we're going to hold for 6 breaths. Now we're going to go over to the other side. Really think of stretching and elongating, and as we're going through this, you can think of slowly increasing through this range of motion. 6 breaths before moving on to the next, squaring down to the floor, and then switching hands, arching back, and then taking it all the way down. So we're doing just once on each side here at this slower pace, and then sweeping it up. And then we're going to do it 2 more times after we come out of this, but we're going to do it a little bit quicker. So as we're going through this a little bit quicker, we're thinking of coming into that full range of motion and then moving and flowing into the next. So we're not rushing the movements, but we're not having as much of a passive stretch as the first time around. So 3 times all together going through these, 2 of those being a little bit more sped up. After you finish those 3, we're going to come to the center, reaching through the legs. You can plant the hands on the ground and walk them back, or you can hang at the elbows can move through the hips to kind of feel through some sticky spots as well. Holding for about 8 breaths and then rolling up. Taking it down to the hips now, we're going to take a lateral lunge over to the side, hips going back and controlling it down to the floor. That outside leg that's straight, you can turn into it to make it a little bit easier to control all the way down. We're going to take it into our pigeon, holding this for 8 breaths. And then we're going to reach up towards the ceiling, holding that for 6 breaths. As you're going through that lateral lunge, you are welcome to use your hands to help you on the way down, as well as helping you on the way up. It is a challenging movement, really testing your mobility and your strength in your hips, as well as in your ankles. So utilize your hands as needed. As we're coming back, we're going to reposition the bent leg, pressing both feet into the floor, coming forwards and lifting up. We're going to do this twice on each side. And as we're going through this lateral lunge, make sure to keep that foot flat. If you are coming up on your toes, it's going to place you in a different position as far as your center of gravity and how you're activating through that leg. So really make sure to keep that foot flat to assist you as you're going up and down through this movement. So like I said, we're going through these twice on each side. Repositioning that leg to help you up, taking it down on the other side and into your pigeon. Now, as we're going into our pigeon, you really want to make sure that your hips are squared to the floor. The leg that is going back, you don't want it to be rolling back, causing you to roll out towards that front leg. So really make sure it's anchored down, lift it up through the chest. And if you're having difficulty balancing here because you're not quite low enough to support yourself yet, you can place a block, a yoga mat, towel, something to help fill in that gap and add some extra support. Coming into our front lunge, we're going to keep the back knee lifted for 2 breaths before dropping it down just to settle in here. And then we're going to bring the front foot out to the edge of the mat, toes turned away, and then opening up the hip by pressing into the knee using your hand or your elbow. Make sure your hip stays square to the floor and that you're not dropping the back hip down. As soon as that hip starts to turn in, the front hip starts to close, which we are trying to open for a stretch. We're going to hold the stretch for 8 breaths, and then we're going to bring the foot back into neutral and reach for the back foot. If you can't quite reach it, you can pulse the foot. You can do 10 to 15 of these. Eventually, the range of motion and strength will increase here to where you can grab the foot. You can also use a band to help you as well. You can use either hand to grab the back foot. It'll basically just add a twist to the torso, which can add a little bit more of a stretch. Or if you're using the same arm, this twist is taken out. Then we're going to stretch the hamstrings, extending that front leg, nose down to your knee. And then we're going to pedal the foot. We're going to pedal for 10. Make sure you're really coming into your end range here. So as far as you can, pull that foot back, staying as far forward folded as you can. You should feel this down in your calf as well as the hamstring. And then after 10, bringing the foot up and rotating in and out through your hip. Make sure you're not just going from the ankle or below the knee. So 10 taps, 10 rotations, and then taking it to the other side, holding it for 2 seconds, dropping the back knee, As we walk the front foot out, we're holding for 8 breaths. Make sure that back hip stays lifted and hip stays squared. After our 8 breaths, we're going to walk that foot back in and reach for the back foot. If you're holding the foot, we're holding for about 8 breaths. And this should help to stretch out your quads, your hip flexors. And if you're getting a twist in the back, can also help to open up the chest as well. So really letting that hip drop down for this stretch. And while you're here, you can also shift around to find other sticky or restricted areas that you may have, but really emphasizing on the quads and the hip flexors. After your 8 breaths, we're going to release. And you can see I kind of wiggle around here a little bit. And then we're straightening that front leg, nose down to your shin, and 10 pedals with the foot. Really emphasizing on pulling in as far as you can. It should be a little bit uncomfortable, but like I've been saying, still light enough that the muscles can actually relax and functionally pull yourself through the movement. After the 10 up and down, toes up, 10 side to side. Really thinking of a big rotation here. And then bringing it forwards and coming into your plank. Now we're going to bang out 10 push-ups just to sneak in a little extra conditioning. As we're going through these, we don't want the elbows directly out to the side or directly into the body. We want them out at a 45-degree angle. This will allow the body to optimally push through this range of motion and allow us to utilize the chest and the biceps fairly evenly, keeping a nice hollow body as we go through those. After the 10, we're going to flip over to our back, 50 scissor kicks, 25 pointed toes, and then 25 flexed feet. We're doing these a little bit more aggressively, more just to warm up the hips and get blood flowing. Ideally, we want the legs to be relatively straight, so we're still working on the mobility, but that's not our main concern for this one. This one is just getting the blood flowing. Now we're going to come into a spinal twist. So we're going to hug one of our knees into our chest, circling the ankle 4 to 5 times each direction. Again, really working that range of motion. And then we're dropping the knee across the chest and we're looking away. We're anchoring that opposite shoulder down to the floor and thinking of twisting the knee all the way across, thinking of dropping the foot and the knee down to the floor. Holding this for 6 breaths. And then coming in and switching to the other side. As we're holding these twists, we're thinking of a diagonal pull from our hand to the foot. So thinking of elongating through that twist. And as we're going through these, with each breath, thinking of sinking further and further into that twist. Your foot will find the floor first and then eventually the knee. Really think of pushing and pulling the knee down and out with that hand, but also anchoring the opposite shoulder to the floor. And to finish off, we're going to flip over onto our stomach and finish off with a pectoral stretch. So we're going to bring that arm out just above 90 degrees, and we're going to roll over, opening the chest. As we're going through this, we're not concerned with a spinal twist. We're focused on the chest. So it would be very similar to a wall stretch. That top hand you can push into to assist in opening that. Because we have an external force helping us through this, we want to make sure that we're not applying too much force. It should still be a light enough stretch that we can relax into it, so don't go crazy. But use the leverage of the top arm to open up the shoulder a little bit more. And again, don't worry about the spinal twist. That's not what we're focusing on. We're going to hold each of these for about 10 to 12 seconds or 12 breaths. And then we're going to bring the arm up at a 45-degree angle, rolling the head of the shoulder in so that it touches the floor before rolling over. If you still have a gap, even with the shoulder rolled in, placing a towel or a rolled up mat just to add support to the head of the shoulder before stretching over. Same thing applies here. You can use the top hand to help add a little bit more to that stretch. But again, it should be light enough that the muscles can relax. We're not trying to pop our shoulder out of our socket, so do be mindful that it's not too much, especially in this compromised position. Holding each of these for 10 to 12 breaths, and then we're done. That is our warm-up.